Hey there, wake up. It's Means Morning News. 11 a.m. on the East Coast in Washington, D.C., and this is that source for anti-capitalist news and analysis. Thanks for watching. Good morning to everyone. I'm the host, Sam Sachs. You may recognize me from the trailer to the new film Yell, Stomp, Hiss, in which my friends and I travel around the country doing live shows and committing stochastic terrorism against one of the world's richest men. That movie comes out here on Means TV next month. Be sure to check it out. Now on to the rest of the show. Federal Reserve is meeting later today, and Chair Jerome Powell is expected to announce another 0.75% interest rate hike, the fourth such increase in a row, the fastest pace of rate increases in 40 years. It's aimed at inducing a recession, forcing layoffs, and obliterating whatever bargaining power workers right now have to negotiate for higher wages. Once that mission is accomplished, the Fed says inflation will slow down because people won't have enough money to buy things anymore. Democrats are for the first time beginning to question what Chair Powell is up to here, especially as their midterm election prospects dim on news that the economy is headed toward a recession. Last week, nearly a dozen Democratic lawmakers wrote a letter to Powell. It was signed by the likes of Elizabeth Warren, Sheldon Whitehouse, Rashida Tlaib, and Bernie Sanders. They said of Powell's plans for the economy, quote, "These statements reflect an apparent disregard for the livelihoods of millions of working Americans, and we are deeply concerned that your interest rate hikes risk slowing the economy to a crawl while failing to slow rising prices that continue to harm families." Powell is familiar with Warren's criticism. He was questioned by her at the onset of the Fed's rate increasing strategy, and he admitted that the Fed's actions would do nothing to reduce the price of food and energy, the two main things Americans have to pay for on a daily basis.
So let's talk about what the Fed is and isn't doing when it raises interest rates to try to bring down inflation. Let's start with gas prices. The price of gas is up 40% since Russia invaded Ukraine in February. Chair Powell, will gas prices go down as a result of your interest rate increase?
I would not think so, no.
Okay. So let's look at another necessity, food. Price of groceries is up nearly 12% this year. Americans feel the pinch. No matter how much groceries cost, people still got to eat. Chair Powell, will the Fed's interest rate increases bring food prices down for families?
I wouldn't say so, no.
Okay.
Of course, price hikes in those areas are a result still of supply chain problems lingering from the pandemic, also the war in Ukraine, and most importantly, corporate consolidation and profit seeking. Disciplining labor to reduce prices doesn't work when companies are increasing prices well above their labor costs in order to accumulate the highest profit margins they've ever had. And there is no sign of slowing down there, even as the Fed cranks up rates. The New York Times documented a number of companies that plan to continue price increases, not because they have to stay in business, but because they can get away with it. Quote, PepsiCo raised its sales and profit forecast for the year, in large part because of consumers' willingness to pay more for soda and snacks. Here's another one. Quote, Chipotle Mexican Grill has seen minimal resistance to price increases, Brian Niccol, the restaurant chain's chief executive, told investors. In the third quarter, Chipotle increased prices 13% from a year earlier, and it expects prices to be up 15% year over year in the fourth quarter. And at Colgate-Palmolive, the company increased prices 9% in the third quarter, with one of its executives saying, quote, "We felt it was very important to get ahead of the inflationary environment and take as much pricing as we could." So is it labor that needs to be disciplined, or is it capital? Assuming Powell succeeds here and millions of Americans are put out of work, a new problem arises: the disrepair of state unemployment systems. The pandemic exposed just how inadequate state unemployment insurance programs are, which is why the federal government had to step in and significantly boost benefits and require that more people be eligible for them. However, that was only temporary. Federal extended unemployment insurance program was allowed to expire last September. President Biden swallowed up capitalist propaganda that the expanded benefits were preventing people from working, that they were just sitting on the couch, cashing their too generous unemployment checks. What's ironic is that now, a year later, the Fed is actively trying to reduce the number of people working. Without the federal boost, state unemployment insurance programs will be unable to care for workers who are about to suffer mass layoffs. In fact, that's already the case. The Century Foundation released new data showing the sorry state of these programs. Here's something. The percentage of out-of-work people actually receiving unemployment insurance is down to less than 27. That's because they are ineligible because of the job they had before or because they've maxed out how many weeks they can collect insurance. It's an abysmally low number compared to the Great Recession's 41% recipiency rate. And during the first year of the pandemic, when the federal program kicked in, the recipiency rate was 76%. So fewer people now have access to these programs, and the ones that do are not getting sufficient help. The Century Foundation reported that in the first quarter of this year, unemployment payments only covered about 39% of the wages that the worker was previously earning. When the federal program existed, benefits covered nearly 80% of pre-layoff wages. And since these are state programs, there is variation in how they are administered, with Black populations getting screwed. Century Foundation noted that, quote, of the 10 states with the largest Black population share, 4 are in the bottom 10 ranking in terms of their unemployment insurance benefits wage replacement rates. These states include Louisiana, with a 31% Black population, where the average weekly benefit of $186 only replaces 28.7% of wages. So this is what the Fed will be throwing workers into: a broken unemployment system that can't possibly provide adequate support to the volumes of people who will be forced out of their job. All while corporate profits are at historic highs. I'd ask someone who's good at the economy to please help me understand all this, but I think I get it. It's just how capitalism is supposed to work. 26-year-old Gilberto Garcia was found dead in his jail cell at New York City's Rikers Island this week. He's the 18th dead inmate at the facility this year, surpassing last year's total of 16. Garcia was arrested on robbery charges and sent to Rikers exactly 3 years before his death. And you want to know what's really fucked up? He never received a trial. And since he couldn't afford bail, he was forced to sit in Rikers, one of the worst places on earth, for 3 years, waiting for legal proceedings that would never come until he finally succumbed. It's the highest death rate in a decade at Rikers, and this latest incident comes just days after a federal monitor released a report showing the extent of inhumane treatment at the facility. According to The Gothamist, the review, funded by the city, found that, quote, the conditions in the jail remain dangerously unsafe, and the monitoring team remains gravely concerned about the alarming number of in-custody deaths, violence among people in custody, lack of an effective restrictive housing model, and various facets of the correction department's use of force practices and operational practices. The report added that, quote, nearly every facet of the jail's operations, procedures, and practices needs to be dismantled and reconstituted, and there must be an all-encompassing cultural and behavioral change among thousands of staff for whom poor practice has been embedded and normalized for decades. The problem is the report also found that the current leadership team put in place by Mayor Eric Adams could do the job of fixing it. Quote, The department's leadership team has demonstrated their understanding of both the big picture of what must be achieved and the nuance and sequence of all the things that must change to achieve it. Yeah, I seriously doubt that. Adams has been on the job now for a year, and the situation at Rikers has only deteriorated further. In September, the Gothamist obtained images from inside the jail showing the horrific conditions. They show, quote, a man defecating in his shorts due to a lack of toilets in the intake area, and then being left in his soiled clothes for 11 hours until another incarcerated person, not jail staff, brought him new clothes. A detainee locked in a cage shower for nearly 24 hours before he injured himself, and incarcerated people dragging sick people to medical care, and even administering chest compressions themselves because assigned officers weren't present. No matter what crime you're alleged to have committed, getting sent to Rikers now is a de facto death sentence. It's a moral stain on a country that's already pretty soiled. Close Rikers, close all the jails. Brazil's reactionary president Jair Bolsonaro finally broke his silence on Tuesday following the weekend's electoral defeat to leftist Lula da Silva. And there are some sighs of relief in the country since Bolsonaro did not pledge to dispute the election or try to do a coup to remain in power, something he had threatened to do before the contest. But also, Bolsonaro did not concede nor recognize Lula as the legitimate winner. I mean, he may never do that, similar to how Trump still has not recognized that Joe Biden won in 2020. But the important thing is that Bolsonaro will leave office, as confirmed by his chief of staff, who told reporters that a just transition process will begin in accordance with the law. There still is concern, however, that Bolsonaro might use the sparse protests that his supporters are engaged in around Brazil right now to create chaos in order to negotiate a deal that shields him and his family from future prosecution. One of the reasons Bolsonaro has clung so tightly to power is his fear of being prosecuted for a number of crimes after he leaves office, from rank corruption to mismanagement during the pandemic to even some shady murders. As The Guardian reported, quote, on Tuesday night, Bolsonaro was reportedly locked in talks with at least 6 members of the Supreme Court as part of that supposed negotiation. One prominent political journalist, Guilherme Amado, said that the president planned to request that neither he nor his family be prosecuted once he stepped down. We'll see how that works out for him. There's probably a non-zero chance this ends with Bolsonaro fleeing the country and seeking asylum at Mar-a-Lago with his good buddies in the American fascist movement. Sometimes the effect of mega mergers might feel remote. When big wholesale industrial companies join forces, it might not feel like it impacts your life that much on a daily basis, even if it does. Well, this one does hit differently if you live in the US. Grocery store conglomerates Kroger's and Albertsons proposed to merge recently in a move that would impact roughly $1 in every $8 spent on groceries in this country, with both companies owning numerous recognizable retail names. Regulators still need to approve of the proposed deal, and labor leaders are sounding the alarm, urging them not to. On Monday, Faye Gunther, president of the United Food and Commercial Workers, local in the Pacific Northwest, said this, quote, if you have a Safeway right across the street from Kroger, which of these stores will be closed? I don't know the answer to that, but the threat is it will either be divested or closed. When the merger was first proposed 2 weeks ago, UFCW's national leadership warned that the deal would threaten numerous jobs while adding to inflationary pressures people in the U.S. are already feeling because we live in a corporate oligarchy with few competitive markets. Quote, the proposed merger between Kroger and Albertsons has serious implications for hundreds of thousands of our UFCW members and America's families who are more concerned than ever about inflation's impact on the price of their food and groceries, prescription drugs, and gas. Kroger workers have already been involved in class war against the company to end exploitation. Earlier this year, 8,000 workers at Kroger-owned King Soopers went on strike, and another strike involving 12,000 Kroger workers in Ohio was narrowly avoided in September when a new labor contract was agreed to. Research from the Economic Roundtable found that nearly half of Kroger workers can't afford rent, more than a third said they can't afford groceries, and 14% that said that they were or have been homeless in the past year. Company executives have long known about how precarious their workers are and simply don't care. A mega merger between Kroger's and Albertsons will only worsen the situation, but this is all pretty good news if you're a rent-seeking capitalist, even if the merger isn't approved. When the deal was announced, Albertsons said it would pay shareholders a special $4 billion dividend. State attorneys general asked the company to please reconsider doing that. And this week, corporate management replied, "Nah, we're good. We're going to do that." Company also denied that it had anything to do with the merger, even though it was announced simultaneously. The world's richest man, Elon Musk, is in sole control of Twitter, which basically means he's spending all his time online responding to crank complaints, mostly from conservatives, like why Arizona's Republican Secretary of State candidate had his account suspended. Elon is looking into it. Or why the website is censoring bunk stories about Democratic ballot harvesting being shared by far-right activist Tom Fitton. Musk also looking into that. Or why account CatTurd2 is still shadow banned. Yep, Elon's on that case as well. My guess is he keeps this up for another week or so before he gets tired of it. When Elon's not serving as Twitter's one-man complaint department, he is embarrassing himself in other ways, like haggling with author Stephen King about how much people should have to pay for their blue check marks. Yep, in a desperate bid to raise revenue for his debt-laden social media company, Musk is proposing that people pay to be verified, $8 a month. Here's how Musk pitched the idea in a Twitter thread later. Quote, "Twitter's current lords and peasants system for who has or doesn't have a blue check mark is bullshit. Power to the people, blue for $8 a month." Nothing says power to the people like making them pay for a service that was already free before. Musk adds that the new subscription service will include a better user experience, quote, "priority in replies, mentions, and search, which is essential to defeat spam and scam, ability to post long video and audio, and half as many ads." Damn, dude, that's so egalitarian of you, providing a better experience to only those who can afford it. You're really sticking it to the lords there. This is what humanity's most brilliant mind has come up with to fix Twitter. So far, users have panned the idea. Tech investor and Musk booster Jason Calacanis posted a poll on Twitter asking people how much they would be willing to pay per month to get a blue check mark. $5, $10, $15 a month? Well, more than 80% of respondents said that they wouldn't pay shit. And as the Wall Street Journal reported, if 10% of Twitter's currently verified users opt to pay for their blue checkmark, it would only raise an additional $4 million of revenue for the company. That's 1/1000th of the revenue the site makes through advertising, and obviously well below the additional revenue needed for Twitter to pay off its $1 billion a year post-buyout debt payments. Also, advertisers are already pulling the plug on doing business with Twitter, fearing that Musk's lack of commitment to content moderation will become a liability for brands. This also from the Wall Street Journal, quote, "Two large advertising companies recommended that their clients temporarily hold off on advertising on Twitter, adding urgency to Mr. Musk's efforts to identify alternative revenue sources. Both Interpublic Group of Companies and Havas Media have urged their clients to pause their Twitter ads because of concerns about the company's ability to monitor its content," it's according to people familiar with the situation. I gotta say, part of me will miss Twitter when it's gone, but watching Elon Musk speedrun the destruction of the platform after sinking billions of dollars into buying it will kind of be worth it. All right, friends, the show ends this morning with a sunrise from Washington. It was sent in by Tonsky in Seattle, who dedicated it to all the grocery store workers who have to go into work underpaid and understaffed as corporations make record profits. Enjoy the sunrise. Thanks, Tonsky. Show's over. Thanks for watching, and thanks to the team behind the scenes. Please subscribe to our YouTube and podcast channels if you haven't already. One day, capitalism will fall. Until then, we'll be right here. See you tomorrow. Hey, thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of our new videos. Also, if you want to see Means Morning News in its complete form, not just the clips we post here, head on over to Means TV and get access to all our new episodes and our entire backlog, plus tons of other great movies and original TV shows.